I used to think I had really good friends, the kind you feel lucky to have because they always showed up when something went right in your life. Every time I succeeded, they were there, smiling, cheering, acting like they were genuinely happy for me. And for a long time, I believed that smile. I needed to believe it. But then there were moments, tiny ones, where I accidentally caught a different face hiding underneath. A look that slipped out too fast for them to cover, a hint of tension around the eyes, a smile that didn't reach the corners, a quick flicker of something colder, envy, insecurity, maybe even resentment. And the worst part wasn't what I saw, it was how it made me feel. That quiet sting in your chest when you realize the joy you're sharing isn't landing the way you hoped. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, maybe I'm being sensitive, but then I learned something that made everything click. Researchers at UC Berkeley found that we pick up negative micro-expressions, those tiny, honest flashes of emotion in less than 1/10 of a second. Our brains catch the truth long before our minds want to accept it. So it's not your imagination. You felt it because it was real. And once you see that hidden face, it changes something inside you. You start sharing less. You shrink your joy. You tell your wins like they're no big deal, just to avoid that uncomfortable shift in the air. You think you're protecting the friendship, but really, you're dimming yourself. And deep down, a part of you knows, a real friend shouldn't make you feel smaller just because your light got a little brighter. After the moment you realized your friend's smile wasn't real, something inside you shifted, quietly, almost gently, like a small crack forming beneath the surface. No one else could see it. You didn't even talk about it. But from that day on, you weren't as open with them as before. Not out of spite, not out of anger. Just a quiet instinct telling you to step back, to hold a little bit of yourself in. It wasn't a dramatic goodbye, it was simply the beginning of a slow, careful distance. You noticed it in the way you paused before texting them good news. You found yourself typing a message, then deleting it, thinking, maybe I'll just keep this to myself. You stopped telling them the small things, the funny moment at work, the random thought that made you laugh, the tiny good news you used to share without a second thought. It wasn't intentional. It was protective. A soft shield your heart built on its own after sensing something it didn't want to feel again. And over time, the conversations felt different, shorter, shallower. Not because you wanted them to be, but because you no longer felt safe giving more. When you did open up, you found yourself choosing your words carefully, making your good news sound smaller or avoiding topics that might trigger that cold flicker in their eyes. Your body remembered the discomfort, even before your mind explained it. So slowly, you adjusted. You shared less and you expected less. There's a psychological explanation for this. A study published in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships found that people withdraw emotionally from relationships when they sense repeated invalidation, even subtle invalidation. Your brain learns that certain people are not safe spaces for vulnerability. So without making a conscious decision, you start reducing how much of yourself you offer. Not because you're cold, but because you're hurting, and you felt it, the quiet grief of losing a friendship, without any fight, without any dramatic ending, just a slow fading. You still cared about them, you still wished them well, but something was different now. You didn't lean on them the way you once did. You didn't reach out first. Their opinions didn't carry the same weight. The emotional closeness that once felt effortless now felt like too much work for too little safety. Sometimes you wondered if they noticed, if they felt you pulling away. Part of you hoped they would ask, "Are you okay? Did I hurt you somehow?" But they never did. And that silence confirmed what your heart already knew. This relationship was only safe when you were small. The moment you started growing, the dynamic cracked. And instead of trying to fit yourself back into that smaller version of you, you quietly chose not to. And maybe that's where the real healing began. Not in a big confrontation, not in a dramatic exit, but in the soft, steady decision to protect your light. You didn't stop loving them, you just stopped shrinking yourself to keep the peace. And as you learned to share less with the wrong people, you also made space to share more with the right ones. The ones whose smiles don't change when you shine. You never planned to become more observant, it just happened. After that first quiet moment, when something inside you shifted, your eyes started catching things you used to defend, excuse or explain away. The jokes that cut a little deeper than they should. The way they never really ask about your life unless it somehow benefits them. How your happiness seems to make them uncomfortable, even though they try to hide it behind a practiced smile. You're not looking for reasons to judge them. It's just that your heart has finally started paying attention to the things it ignored for far too long. You begin noticing how they only show up fully when you're struggling, but disappear or go oddly quiet when things are going well for you. At one point, you would have said maybe they're busy, but the pattern keeps repeating until it's unmistakable. Your sadness seems easier for them to handle than your joy, and that realization stings, because deep down, all you ever wanted was a friendship where both your wins and your losses had a place to land. Slowly, even everyday conversations start to feel different. You notice how often they redirect the topic back to themselves, or how their advice always carries a subtle undertone that makes you feel smaller, not supported. Before, you chalked it up to personality quirks. Now you see the competitiveness hidden under concern, the subtle comparisons, the quiet pauses where a true friend would have met your excitement with warmth, not tension. And as you're seeing all this more clearly, you start understanding something important. Their jealousy didn't begin with you. It began long before you ever entered their story. Psychology calls this insecure attachment. People who grew up feeling overlooked or compared often struggle to feel safe when others succeed. A 2017 study from the University of Kentucky found that people with insecure attachment styles are far more likely to experience envy in close relationships. They don't envy because you did something wrong, they envy because they learned early on that someone else's success meant there was less space left for them. Knowing this doesn't erase the hurt, but it gives the situation a shape, a context. It helps you stop internalizing their reactions. Their discomfort becomes less of a judgment on you and more of a window into their own unhealed wounds. That awareness softens something in you, even as you keep your boundaries. But you also begin noticing what happens inside you, the slight heaviness in your chest before meeting them. How you rehearse your words, trying not to sound too happy, how you shrink your excitement, filtering out pieces of your life to avoid making them uneasy. You didn't realize it before, but you've been dimming yourself for a while. Your body knew this space wasn't fully safe long before your mind caught up. And by the time all these signs come together, you're not angry. You're tired. Tired in a quiet, honest way. Tired enough to finally say to yourself, I deserve friendships where my joy doesn't feel like a burden. And once that truth sinks in, the distance you've been slowly creating doesn't feel like abandonment. It feels like self-respect. You know what's strange? You can spend years beside someone, convinced you understand them, convinced the friendship is solid, safe, and simple. But it's only when you start to feel their jealousy press quietly onto the relationship that something clicks inside you. You realize, maybe things were never as clear as you thought. That heaviness you sense isn't loud. It doesn't show up as shouting or obvious resentment. It shows up in the subtle ways. The pauses, the forced smiles, the way they grow quieter when you share something that should have made them happy for you, and once you notice it, you can't unsee it. Maybe they grew up in a home where love felt earned, not given. A place where praise only came when they performed well, behaved perfectly, or beat someone else at something. When the child next to them did better, the room grew cold. When they fell short, affection disappeared. In a world like that, a child learns early that attention is scarce, that love has limits, and that someone else's success is a threat. Research by Dr. Brené Brown shows that shame and comparison are learned young, and they shape our sense of worth before we even have the language to name those feelings. So if your friend seems to shrink when you shine, it isn't because of who you are now, it's because of who they had to be back then. That's why your happiness doesn't feel neutral to them. When you succeed, it touches a bruise inside them you can't see. They don't resent you. They resent the feeling that success brings up in their own chest. The old belief that they are behind, not enough, or forgotten. Your joy becomes a mirror reflecting everything they fear they lack. And that's the tragic irony. Jealousy isn't really about what you have. It's about what they believe they'll never have. And yet the closer they are to you, the harder it hits them. People think jealousy comes from distance, but it often comes from closeness. From watching someone they care about reach places they don't know how to get to. From loving you, but fearing what your growth means for their place in your life. They admire you and envy you at the same time. They want to celebrate you, but the celebration makes something inside them ache. They're not proud of it. You may imagine envy feels powerful, but in reality it feels like shame. They know their reactions aren't fair. They know they should clap with both hands. They know the jokes that dig too deep, the lukewarm congratulations, the subtle dismissals are not kindness. And the shame of knowing that only makes them hide the jealousy more. So it shows up sideways, not as direct resentment, but as strange silences, awkward expressions, or advice that sounds supportive, but discourages you instead. If you look closely, jealousy reveals itself, not as an explosion, but as erosion. Small comments, hesitant smiles, shifts in tone, little drops that slowly wear down the foundation of trust. Not because they want to hurt you. Most jealous friends don't want to harm the relationship at all. They just don't know how to confront the part of themselves that feels small when they stand next to you. And somewhere inside you, a question starts forming. Do they dislike me, or do they dislike how they feel around me? It's a painful question, but an honest one. Their jealousy isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their wounds. Wounds from years of being compared, criticized, or overlooked. Wounds that whisper to them that they will never be enough unless they catch up to someone else. Once you see this clearly, the picture changes. You stop taking their reactions personally. You stop thinking you caused their pain. You understand they're not truly jealous of you. They're jealous of a version of life they never believed they deserved. You don't notice it at first. You tell yourself you're imagining it, that maybe you're being too sensitive, too aware, too in your head. But slowly, almost silently, jealousy changes the way the friendship feels. Not because you want it to, but because something inside you starts protecting itself. You begin sharing less. You start choosing your words more carefully. You pause before telling them good news. And it's not about drama, it's about safety. It's about realizing the space between you doesn't feel as soft as before. What used to be natural, sending a late night update, celebrating something small, asking for advice, now requires second guessing. You find yourself rehearsing conversations in your mind, trimming away pieces of joy so they won't feel threatened. You downplay things that once made you proud. You shrink moments that deserve to be seen. And somewhere along the way, the friendship stops being the place where you feel free. It becomes the place where you feel watched, measured, compared. The strange part is that they might not even notice the shift. They might still think the friendship is the same because jealousy often blinds the person feeling it. They're too busy wrestling with their own insecurity to notice you stepping back or growing quieter. But you notice. Your body notices. Psychology calls this social threat sensitivity, and studies from the University of Michigan show that when relationships feel emotionally unsafe, the brain activates the same neural pathways associated with physical danger. You're not overreacting. Your nervous system is trying to protect you. And once your body learns to brace itself, it becomes harder to unlearn. You start picking up things you used to overlook. The way they turn the spotlight back to themselves, the way their compliments sound like comparisons, the way their advice feels more like a warning. You notice how often you feel drained instead of supported, how often you walk away questioning yourself instead of feeling understood. These aren't dramatic moments, they're subtle. But subtle things can accumulate like dust until the entire room feels different. There's also the guilt. You don't want to think badly of them. You don't want to label them as toxic or jealous or insecure, so you fight with yourself. You replay conversations, convincing yourself you misread the tone, that maybe they were just tired, that maybe you're the one being unfair, but deep down you know something has shifted. It's the kind of shift you can't fake your way out of, because it happens in your chest before it happens in your mind. What hurts the most is that you didn't want things to change. You weren't looking for reasons to create distance. You just wanted the friendship to stay safe, mutual, warm. But when jealousy enters a relationship, even quietly, it changes the balance. You start carrying more of the emotional weight. You start monitoring the dynamic. You start doing the work of making sure they don't feel threatened, and that's when you realize you've slowly become smaller inside your own friendship. But here's the truth you eventually face. Friendships aren't supposed to make you shrink. They're supposed to give you room to grow. You're allowed to outgrow spaces where you can't breathe. You're allowed to protect moments of joy from people who can't hold them gently. That doesn't make you cold. It doesn't make you selfish. It makes you someone who finally understands that closeness without safety is not closeness. It's self-betrayal. And maybe that's the quiet turning point. Not anger, not confrontation, not a dramatic ending, just an inner knowing that you deserve friendships where your happiness isn't a threat, but a shared warmth. Where your success isn't something to hide, but something to celebrate together. Where you don't have to shrink to be loved. You don't notice the moment you begin to heal. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or some dramatic declaration. It comes quietly, the same way the hurt started. One day, after carrying the weight of someone else's jealousy for too long, you feel something small shift inside you. It isn't anger. It isn't resentment. It's just a soft, tired truth. You can't keep shrinking yourself so someone else can stay comfortable. And once that truth shows up, you can't pretend you didn't hear it. Potentially, you start talking less, not because you want to punish them, but because your heart is finally tired of being careful. You catch yourself editing your excitement, downplaying your achievements, hesitating before sharing good news. And you suddenly realize how unnatural that feels. Good things are supposed to be shared freely, not softened so someone else won't feel threatened. So you begin holding those moments closer to yourself, not out of coldness, but out of self-respect. And strangely, that small act of pulling back feels like breathing again. What makes this part so complicated is that you don't see your jealous friend as a villain. You understand them more than they probably understand themselves. You know jealousy didn't start with you, it started long before, from old wounds, old comparisons, old fears. Research by Dr. Brené Brown shows that people who grow up feeling never enough often struggle to celebrate others because it activates shame, not joy. And knowing this makes you compassionate, but it also makes you honest. Their pain is real, but it's not yours to carry. There's a moment when you realize that protecting their feelings has been costing you pieces of yourself. Every time you dimmed your happiness, you were teaching your own heart that you didn't deserve to shine fully. Every time you laughed off a hurtful comment to keep the peace, you were choosing peace for them, not for you. Healing begins the moment you decide to stop abandoning yourself in the process. And that decision feels both empowering and terrifying. The guilt shows up next. It always does. You wonder if you're being dramatic or too sensitive. You question whether stepping back makes you a bad friend. But then something unexpected happens. You feel lighter. You don't wake up bracing yourself. You don't tiptoe around your own joy. Your nervous system, tired from years of emotional micro-adjustments, finally relaxes. And you realize that guilt is just the old pattern resisting change, not a sign you're doing the wrong thing. With distance, the picture becomes clearer. You see that friendships built on comparison can never feel safe. You see how long you tolerated lukewarm support, subtle digs, and celebrations that always felt a little off. And you see, most painfully, that love without security becomes a battlefield. Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's simply refusing to keep fighting a war you never started. Eventually, you meet people who clap for you without hesitation, whose smiles don't dim when yours brighten, whose support doesn't wobble when you rise. And in their presence, you realize something profound. You were never asking for too much. You were only asking the wrong people. Healing, in the end, isn't about closing the door on someone else. It's about opening the door back to yourself. Your joy, your growth, your right to shine without apology. In the end, jealousy in friendship isn't just about them. It's about what you learn about yourself on the way out. You deserve connections where your joy is safe, where your success isn't something you have to apologize for. If this story felt familiar, you're not alone. And if you want more conversations like this, more clarity, more healing, more honesty, stay with me. There's a lot more we can unpack together.